Gallagher, nominated to the District of Colorado. Casey Pitts, nominated to the Northern District of California. Judge Andrew Schapler, nominated to the Southern District of California. Aaron Subramanian, I hope I'm close in my pronunciation, nominated to the Southern District of New York. And Rosie Hidalgo, nominated to the Director of the Office on Violence Against Women, known as OVW. Congratulations to all our nominees and their families and friends. We have several colleagues joining us who will formally introduce our nominees, and I will turn to them shortly. Before I do so, I have the privilege of introducing Rosie Hidalgo, nominated to head OVW, a critically important component of the Department of Justice. The office provides federal leadership and assistance to help reduce and prevent gender-based violence. The office's responsibility includes administering 24 grant programs to federal, state, local, and tribal authorities. As a veteran of OVW, and someone who spent much of her career working to protect and advocate for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, Ms. Hidalgo will bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the job. In addition to her current work as Special Assistant to the President and Senior Advisor, Ms. Hidalgo has held leadership roles at organizations including Esperanza United and the National Latino Alliance for the Elimination of Domestic Violence. From 2014 to 2017, Ms. Hidalgo served as Deputy Director for the Policy at OVW. She's helped implement grant programs under the Violence Against Women Act. She's a dedicated public servant, a proven coalition builder. She understands what it takes to lead, and she understands what's at stake. That's one of the many reasons her nomination has broad support from National Task Force, YWCA, General Federation of Women's Clubs, Interfaith Coalition, and others. I'm pleased the President has nominated Ms. Hidalgo to head this important agency. They've not had a Senate-confirmed director since 2012. Long overdue. Confident she's up to the task. Let me turn now to my friend and colleague, Senator Chuck Grassley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The nominees that we have before us today have a wide range of experiences. Two served as magistrate judges, one worked a trial lawyer, another specializes in labor law, and one focuses upon public policy. Just in case you wonder what I'm interested in, I'm looking to see how each judicial nominee views the role of a judge and how they will interpret the law. District court judges receive lifetime appointments, and they play a very crucial role in our judicial system. The Senate plays a very important role in thoroughly vetting nominees to ensure our court system works efficiently well and gives equal justice to Americans. Welcome to each of you, and congratulations on your nomination. I yield.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. I'd like to say that members will now introduce the nominees. There's one asterisk. Our Majority Leader, Senator Schumer, is tied up for a few minutes and will be arriving after others have started their introductions. We're going to make special accommodations to him because at the close of the session, his schedule is not under his own control. We're going to open up with Senator Bennett, who's going to speak in the introduction of Judge Gallagher.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, and thank you, Ranking Member Grassley, for your leadership as well and for the opportunity to introduce Gordon Gallagher, President Biden's nominee for the U.S. District Court for the District of Colorado. Judge Gallagher comes to this committee with a stellar reputation in Colorado and over 25 years of service as a prosecutor, a defense attorney, and a magistrate judge. The judge credits his devotion to public service to his grandfather, who served as an air navigator during the Second World War and was shot down over Eastern Europe on his 49th mission. After the war, his grandfather came home to continue the fight for America's highest ideals, working to integrate housing in his community. His example stuck with Gordon. So did a family trip to Colorado when Gordon was just 8 or 9. Like everyone who visits our state, he fell in love with the Rockies. And years later, as a student at McAllister College, he fell in love with a Coloradan, his wife Christine, who joins us today with their children, Rachel, Noah, and Gabriel, and future son-in-law Max, along with his mother, Mary Jane, and his in-laws, Don and Bonnie. In the end, Gordon followed Christine to Colorado, where he earned a law degree from the University of Denver After graduating, Gordon practiced at a law firm representing small businesses and served for nearly 4 years as a deputy district attorney in Mesa County, Colorado. Later, Gordon launched his own firm as a defense attorney and began working with the Office of Alternative Defense Counsel, representing clients who couldn't afford representation. He spent over a decade in this role, fighting for the American ideal that everyone, no matter their means, deserves equal representation before the law. In 2012, Gordon was appointed a part-time magistrate judge for the United States District Court for the District of Colorado, a position he holds to this day. Senator Hickenlooper and I recommended Judge Gallagher for this position because, unlike anyone on the district court in Colorado today, Gordon has spent the majority of his career on the western slope of Colorado, a rural, mountainous part of the state, with a specific perspective on issues ranging from public lands to natural resources to federal regulation. Over his career on the western slope, Gordon's work ranged from representing a young man charged with manslaughter of his best friend to securing rehabilitative services for members of the Southern Ute and Ute Mountain Ute tribes to hearing complaints about traffic delays in a small town court because of shepherders crossing the local highway. As a magistrate judge, Gordon worked on a vast array of issues, including criminal, civil, patent, pro se, and environmental matters, including many cases with difficult trade-offs between natural resources extraction, conservation, and recreation. These issues are common for the U.S. District Court for Colorado, and they require somebody with Judge Gallagher's deep and direct experience. More than that, everyone we've spoken with tells us how much Judge Gallagher enjoys being on the court and how much he cherishes the opportunity to serve our country just like his grandfather. I'll end with this. His entire career has prepared him for this position, Mr. Chairman. Gordon has proven his character, his integrity, his legal acumen over a distinguished 25-year career. I enthusiastically endorse his nomination and urge my colleagues to send him to the floor with a strong bipartisan vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the privilege to introduce Gordon Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator Bennett. It's good to know that both you and Senator Hickenlooper support this nominee. We appreciate you being before the committee. Next, we have two nominees from the state of California and two senators from the state of California to introduce them. First, Senator Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We've got two excellent nominees to serve on the federal district courts in California. Casey Pitts has been nominated to serve on the Northern District, and Andrew Schapler has been nominated to serve on the Southern District. They will both make an excellent addition to the federal bench. Casey Pitts grew up in Minnesota. He received his bachelor's degree from Yale, and then he had the light. He moved to San Francisco, my hometown, where he worked as a paralegal at a law firm for 2 years. That alone gets my vote. He went on to earn his law degree from Yale, where he served as an editor for the Yale Law Journal. After law school, he served as a law clerk for Judge Stephen Reinhart of the Ninth Circuit in Los Angeles. In 2010, he saw the light. He returned to San Francisco to join the law firm of Altshuler and Berzon, where he since became a partner. For more than a decade, he has specialized in complex impact litigation and appeals. He has represented workers, consumers, labor unions, and nonprofit organizations. He has litigated more than 100 cases that were resolved by a decision on the merits. He has also briefed multiple cases, both before the United States Supreme Court and the California Supreme Court. So, he is clearly a nominee with significant litigation experience, and his commitment is strong to equal justice under the law. I believe he will be a good addition to the Northern District bench. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Padilla?
Oh, I missed one.
Hold it just a minute, Senator Padilla.
I'll be brief. I missed Andrew Schapler. He grew up in Northern Carolina. He earned his bachelor's degree from Dartmouth. his law degree from that school called Harvard in the East. After law school, he practiced in North Carolina for several years, both as a public defender and in private practice. In 2004, he saw the light. He joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of California, where he served for 12 years. As a prosecutor, he handled a wide range of challenging criminal cases, including campaign finance fraud, organized crime, and drug trafficking. He also served as deputy chief of the Major Frauds and Special Prosecutions Section. For 5 years, during his service as a prosecutor, Judge Schapler also served as a part-time volunteer judge pro tem in the small claims court in the San Diego Superior Court. I'm almost done. He was appointed to serve as a magistrate judge for the Southern District of California. And for the last 6 years, he has overseen both civil and criminal cases, including presiding over 5 criminal trials. He served our country in the military as a major in the U.S. Army, California Army National Guard. That led him to serve as presiding judge for the Southern District of California's Veterans Diversion Court, which provides a pretrial program for honorably discharged veterans. Throughout his career, he has demonstrated a strong commitment to public service, and he's going to be an asset on the federal bench. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ranking Member Grassley. I'll apologize in advance if some of what I share is a little repetitive, but the qualifications and credentials of the 2 nominees from California are just so impressive. It is my privilege today to also introduce these 2 stellar public servants and highly qualified nominees to serve on federal district courts in California. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Casey Pitts, who was nominated by the President to serve on the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. As you heard, Casey was born in Minnesota and grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. He attended Yale University and later Yale University School of Law, from which he earned his JD in 2008. After law school, Casey headed west to serve as a law clerk on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for Judge Stephen Reinhart before joining the public interest law firm Altshuler Berzin in San Francisco, where he has been ever since. He has represented workers, he's represented consumers and public interest groups fighting to protect the lives and livelihoods of Americans, and to help shape how and who our economy and our courts work for. Now, if confirmed, Casey would be the only currently serving LGBTQ Article 3 judge on the district court for the Northern District of California. His life experience, his credentials, and his record of fighting for people make him an ideal candidate to serve Californians of the Northern District. And that's why he has earned the support from lawyers across the political spectrum. And I'm proud to support his nomination today, and I hope all of my colleagues will join me. Mr. Chair, I also have the honor of introducing Judge Andrew Schapler, who's a nominee to serve on the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of California. Growing up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, from an early age, Judge Schapler had strong moral role models to look up to. His parents, college professors, and veterans of the civil rights movement instilled in him the importance of public service. Judge Schapler earned his undergraduate degree from Dartmouth College and his JD from Harvard Law School in 1997. After school, he worked briefly as a public defender before joining a criminal defense law firm where he would spend the next 6 years. By 2004, Judge Schapler became an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of California, where he served until 2016, eventually rising to the position of Deputy Section Chief of the Major Frauds and Special Prosecutions Unit. Now, given his exemplary work and work ethic, in 2016, Judge Schapler was selected to serve as a magistrate judge in the Southern District, where he's served for the last 6 years. But his service to our country extends well beyond the bench. In 2014, at the age of 43, Judge Schapler chose to join the California National Guard as a judge advocate. After obtaining both an age and medical waiver to serve, in 2018, he deployed to Afghanistan as part of Operation Freedom Sentinel. He earned the Bronze Star for his service and was promoted to the rank of Major. He has committed his career to protecting our freedoms both at home and abroad, and I'm proud to support his confirmation. Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, as a committee, working together with President Biden, we have a great deal of input in deciding the character and qualifications deemed necessary for serving as a federal judge. We're tasked with answering a fundamental question: what type of person should represent us on the federal bench? I can think of no one as qualified as Casey Pitts and Judge Andrew Schapler. Whether serving overseas or protecting workers here at home, these two nominees have proven time and time again that the American people are at the heart of their service, and that they'll provide their experienced, trusted voices to California's federal courts. So I want to thank not only Mr. Pitts and Judge Schapler for your years of service to the people, but to your families as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge my colleagues to advance these nominations.
Thank you very much, Senator Padilla. As I mentioned earlier, and before several of my colleagues arrived, Senator Schumer is going to be here to formally introduce Mr. Subramanian. But I ask the panel, all of the nominees, to come forward now for places at the table and to take the oath. Maximum efficiency. She's working on the pressure. She is. The whole world's watching. Thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. And now we'll proceed with opening statements from each of the nominees, starting with Judge Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, members of this committee, for convening this hearing and for taking up my nomination. I'd like to thank President Biden for nominating me. Truly the honor and privilege of my professional career, and to Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper for recommending me to the President, and for Senator Bennett's gracious introduction this morning. I'd also like to thank the nominating committee that Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper convened that recommended me to the senators. Also, there are so many other individuals who I'd like to thank who have assisted in getting me here today. I can't thank them all because of our time limits, but please know that you're in my heart and my thanks are with you. And I will thank you personally at a later time. I'd like to take a moment to introduce those individuals who I have the pleasure of having here with me today, and some who are not. I'll start with my wife, Christine, who's seated behind me. We met 33 years ago in college when I was a teenager, and she's been by my side, my love and my best friend for these past decades, and I wouldn't want to walk this walk of life without her. We've raised 3 wonderful children, now all adults, Rachel, Noah, and Gabriel, who are all with us here today. We are so incredibly proud of the young adults that they have become, and I have to thank them for their incredible support and perseverance in this journey. Also with Rachel and us today is Max, Rachel's fiance, who we've taken into our heart and love and look forward to their upcoming marriage. Also with me is my mother, Mary Jane, and my father-in-law, Don, and my mother-in-law, Bonnie. All of them have had a hand in raising me and getting me here today, and my love and thanks go to each of them. As Senator Bennett remarked, I come from, at least now, the western slope of Colorado. 25 years ago, my wife and I had the great good fortune of moving there so I could take a job as a young prosecutor. We took along with us our 8-month-old daughter. The western slope is a land of high mountains, deep, rugged, red canyons, and wonderful, wonderful people. I've had an enormous amount of support statewide in Colorado, but particularly from the wonderful people of western Colorado who have supported me, encouraged me, and supported my nomination in getting here today. And I want to thank you all. And Senators, I look forward to answering your questions today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pitts?
Thank you, Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and all of the members of the Judiciary Committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. Thank you in particular to Senator Padilla and Senator Feinstein and their judicial selection committees for recommending me and for both senators' warm introductions. Thank you as well to President Biden for nominating me to serve this country as a federal district court judge and for exhibiting your faith in my abilities and qualifications for that position. It is the honor of a lifetime to be considered. I am sitting before you today because of the incredibly talented lawyers and judges who have mentored me over the last 2 decades. I know you are all here with me in spirit. I also want to acknowledge the many family members who are supporting me from afar today, including my father-in-law and mother-in-law, Jayant and Mrinal Sabnis, our wonderful nieces and nephews around the country, and my brother Bryce and his wife Kelsey, my sister-in-law Annika and her husband Nolan, and my sister Jill and her husband Travis. I want to specifically note and honor Travis's ongoing active duty service in the United States Navy. I can only hope that I will be fortunate enough to soon join Travis in service to this country. I'm thankful to have in the hearing room with me today the other most important people in my life. First, my parents, including my father and stepmother, Bruce and Ryn Pitts, and my mother and stepfather, Jean and Bill Weaver, whose unconditional love and guidance allowed me to flourish and who taught me to approach life with humility, gratitude, and good humor. From the time that my mother and father enrolled in the National Health Service to care for patients in rural western Minnesota, through decades of work as primary care physicians in North Dakota, my parents have taught me the importance of living a life of service to others, and I have tried to follow that example through my own life. I would also like to thank my big sister, Amber Olig, who is here with me today. Finally, I would not be here today were it not for my husband, Dr. Amit Subnis, who stepped away from his important work caring for kids with cancer to be with us today. Amit, from the day we met nearly 2 decades ago through today, I have been inspired by your commitment to using your incredible skills to help others. I have grown immeasurably over the last 18 years thanks to your support and belief in me. You are both my rock and my guiding star. Thank you again to Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and the committee. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Pitt. Judge Schapler.
This morning I am overwhelmed. This morning I am overwhelmed with gratitude. I am grateful to Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and all the senators on this committee and their staffs for holding this hearing, to President Biden for the greatest honor of my career, to Senators Padilla and Feinstein for their incredibly kind words of introduction, and also to Senators Padilla and Feinstein and their staffs and their judicial selection committees for supporting my nomination and for their faith in me. I am especially grateful for my family. My wife and soulmate, Emma Schapler, is, as always, by my side. Her love and support sustain me, and I love her more every day. She is joined today by my sister Lisa Rogers and her husband Joel, as well as by my lifelong friends Dr. Veda Thompson, Captain Joe Eldred, and Ed Eldred. Many family members are supporting me from afar. Today, my brother, Captain David Schapler, is on military duty as a U.S. Navy SEAL, and my sister Carrie Abbott is on an overseas trip. And our beloved departed parents, Drs. John and Janice Schapler, are always in my heart and are here in spirit. I want to thank the many who helped me on my journey here. That list includes my court family at the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of California, the judges, court staff, and my chambers staff, including my law clerk, Mick Alford, who is here. It also includes my military family in the U.S. Army and California Army National Guard, my former colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and all the attorneys and staff I worked with in North Carolina when I was working in complex civil litigation and criminal defense, including at the Public Defender's Office and at the law firm of Rudolph, Maher, Whitehouse, and Fialco. One of those attorneys, my friend Amos Tyndall, drove from North Carolina to be here today. Finally, I am grateful to our family friends, Rosie Harrington and the late Dr. Curtis Harper, who each helped raise me. I am truly blessed to be here, and I cannot express my gratitude enough to all those who made it possible. I look forward to your questions, Senator.
Thank you very much. Mr. Subramanian.
Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and to all the members of this committee, thank you for considering my nomination today. Thank you to President Biden for giving me the opportunity to serve my country. And I want to thank Leader Schumer for recommending me to President Biden and to Senator Gillibrand for her support. My parents, AK and Sundari Subramanian, are here from Texas. They came to this country from India in 1970. And throughout their lives, they sacrificed so that I could have a better life. My father grew up in a small village. One generation later, his son is sitting before this honorable committee. That is the American dream. Thank you, Amma Napa. My big sister Indu is here from California, where she serves as chief of medicine for a public health system. I'm so proud of her and grateful for her support here. And my wife Somya is here. She is an amazing attorney, the rock of our family, my best friend, and she lifts up everyone around her. I would not be here today without her support and love over the last 15 years. Thank you so much. I love you. My 7-year-old son Niam and 5-year-old daughter Rena are also here today. They are thoughtful and caring children who inspire me every day. I'm also joined here by some of the most talented trial lawyers in America, from Sussman Godfrey, Bill Carmody, Jacob Buchdahl, Sean Rabin, and Mark Musico. Steve Sussman, one of my mentors, sadly passed away during the COVID pandemic. I wish every day that he was still here with us. My best friends Sung Kim and Siva Umblum are here too. They've been with me through thick and thin for decades. And finally, I want to express my deep gratitude to 3 giants of the law who gave me my start. The Honorable Gerard E. Lynch, who I clerked for in the Southern District of New York before he went to the Second Circuit. The Honorable Dennis Jacobs on the Second Circuit, and the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who tragically passed away 2 years ago. Senators, thank you again for your consideration, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. I might say that Niam and Rena have been perfectly representing you in their chairs there. So happy to hear their names mentioned. Ms. Hidalgo.
Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, thank you so much for considering today my nomination to serve as the Director of the Office on Violence Against Women at the U.S. Department of Justice. I also want to express my deep gratitude to President Biden for the honor of this nomination. I am blessed to have so many family members, friends, colleagues, and mentors who have supported and inspired me. And I want to especially thank my family who's here with me today. My wonderful husband of 30 years, Michael McCabe, who's been a constant source of support and encouragement, and my children, My youngest, Carolina, who's a senior at Tufts University in Boston, got up at 3 a.m. this morning to catch a flight to join me here, despite being in the middle of final exams. Hopefully she's not snoozing back there. Okay. My son, Patrick, who recently started a job at the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance at the U.S. Agency for International Development. And my daughter, Christina, who works as a hospital social worker in Miami and flew up here with her husband and my wonderful new son-in-law, Reggie. I am so proud of each of them. They inspire me, they bring me joy, and they give me hope for the future. I want to thank my brother Manny, my sister Bibi, and my cousin Albert, who also are here joining me today, and my sister Ellie, who's joining remotely. And I especially want to thank my father, Manuel Hidalgo, who is cheering for me remotely from Miami. So appreciative of his unconditional love and encouragement throughout my life, and for his example of integrity and dedication. I also want to express gratitude to my mother, Eloisa, and my youngest brother, Patrick, who are joining us from above, and just the gratitude that their light, their love, shine on our family each day. My parents came to the United States from Cuba, fleeing political persecution. As a child, I remember my father telling me that despite the hardships they endured, he realized that there are three of the most important things in life that can never be taken away from you: faith, family, and education. I am grateful for my faith that has been a source of hope and love and is a cornerstone of my dedication to service throughout my life. I am grateful for my family, including my large extended family, that has been a deep well of love, support, and inspiration. And I am grateful for my education, both my formal education, but also all that I have learned in community and from the wisdom of those with lived experiences. And I remain committed to lifelong learning. Improving our nation's commitment to preventing and addressing domestic violence, sexual assault, and other forms of gender-based violence is an important national priority and a bipartisan issue. Throughout my career over the past 30 years, I have seen firsthand the progress that we have made in this nation. Thanks to legislation like the Violence Against Women Act, the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act, and other federal and state legislation and initiatives. And yet, undoubtedly, we have further to go. I believe that everyone has a right to live free from the threat of violence and the impact of abuse, and that every victim, survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, or other forms of gender-based violence should be able to access trauma-informed and comprehensive services and support, and to be able to seek safety, justice, healing, and well-being. When I worked as an attorney providing civil legal services, I saw firsthand the importance of centering the voices of survivors and of honoring their courage, resilience, and agency. When I worked as a policy director and trainer at a national nonprofit organization, I came to really appreciate how important it is to strengthen and expand the coordinated community response, which is a cornerstone of VAWA, and also to ensure that we are improving access to services and safety for all survivors, including those from historically marginalized or underserved communities. When I previously had the honor of serving at OVW, I saw firsthand the significant impact of the VAWA grant programs throughout the 56 states and territories and tribal communities. I also supported the important role of OVW to help coordinate across federal agencies to improve access to comprehensive services for survivors. Currently, it has been an honor to serve at the White House, where I have had the opportunity, among other things, to support the recent bipartisan legislation to reauthorize and strengthen the Violence Against Women Act. I am humbled and honored by the extraordinary trust and responsibility of serving as a director of OVW if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed. I look forward to the opportunity to work with the wonderful staff at OVW to help collaborate with other federal agencies and with Congress and stakeholders together to advance these important goals. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to questions from the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Hidalgo, for your testimony. And now I would ask Mr. Subramanian, if you would yield your chair to the senior senator from the state of New York who has arrived to say some kind things about you. It's built into us. Senator Schumer, the floor is yours.
We all do. Okay, well, thank you, and
Make sure the microphone is on.
yes, and I thank Mr. Subramanian for yielding his chair, but not his chair on the bench, just his chair right here at the witness table. And I want to thank you, Chairman Durbin. I want to thank Member Grassley and all the members of the committee for the opportunity to come before you and introduce a truly outstanding nominee to the federal bench, Arun Subramanian. Soon you'll learn why Mr. Subramanian would make an outstanding jurist, and I'm confident you will join me and President Biden in understanding precisely why he is uniquely qualified as a fit for the Southern District. If confirmed, Mr. Subramanian will be the first South Asian judge in the Southern District of New York, which has a significant South Asian population. Arun was born in Pittsburgh, PA, 1979. His parents immigrated to America from India in the early 1970s with little money and no connections. His father served as a control system engineer at several companies. His mother worked several jobs, including as a bookkeeper. Arun graduated summa cum laude from Case Western Reserve University in 2001 with a bachelor's degree in computer science and English. 3 years later, he earned his law degree from Columbia Law School as a James Kent and Harlan Fiske Stone Scholar. He also served as executive articles editor for the Columbia Law Review. Arun is a steadfast consumer protection expert. He currently serves as a partner with Sussman Godfrey, where he spent his career defending consumers and individuals injured by unfair and illegal practices, including public entities and whistleblowers. He's also defended victims of trafficking in child pornography. Among his victories include securing more than $400 million for state and federal governments through a lawsuit connected to Novartis Pharmaceuticals, gaining $590 million in settlements from LIBOR in an ongoing price-fixing class action, and achieving a $100 million judgment in a federal residential mortgage-backed securities case against Flagstar Bank after the crisis of 2008. He has plenty of experience in the federal court system, serving as a law clerk to Judge Dennis Jacobs on the Second Circuit, Judge Gerald Lynch in the Southern District of New York, and the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg of Brooklyn, New York. He was also appointed by Chief Justice John Roberts to serve on the court's advisory committee for the Federal Rules of Evidence. Arun's colleagues, including judges for whom he's clerked, attorneys he's worked with for and against, hold him in the highest regard. Those who were consulted as part of my search committee's exhaustive review process described him as a fantastic person and one of the finest lawyers many of them have ever worked with. He is renowned for his brilliant legal mind and sound judgment, and is unanimously viewed as someone who would be a strong addition to the Southern District bench. In short, our courts need more people like Arun Subramanian. I have been proud to work with many of you over the last 2 years in advancing nominees who are not only qualified, but also break the pattern of nominees we've grown accustomed to for so long. Together, the Senate has confirmed more people of color, more women, and more nominees from unique backgrounds than perhaps under any administration. In the years to come, we will continue maintaining a laser-like focus on bringing balance and impartiality back to our courts. We have more work to do, but I'm proud of the progress we've made. So I want to thank Arun for being here. I want to congratulate him on his nomination and thank my colleagues and my fellow witnesses here for letting me speak right now. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. We appreciate your appearing before us, and we know that Senator Gillibrand shares your feelings
She does.
about this nominee. We're going to start with a round of questionings, and each member will have 5 minutes to ask those questions. Judge Schapler, why did you decide to join the National Guard?
Thank you for the question, Chair Durbin. I've had a lifelong commitment to public service. My parents taught us that public service was the highest calling, so it's something that I had always wanted to do, and I was, one of the greatest honors of my life was being able to commission in the U.S. Army and California Army National Guard and to serve my country overseas.
And you were deployed to Afghanistan, I understand, in 2018?
That's correct. I was a judge advocate for a Green Beret unit called Special Operations Detachment North that folded into a larger Special Operations element in Afghanistan.
So what experiences there are still with you today?
Many, Senator. I made a lot of lasting friendships, both with people in our unit and also with the Afghan partners that we were working with. We were working with Special Forces units and commandos in Afghanistan, and I've maintained contacts with all of those folks, including the interpreters who worked with us.
Great, thank you for serving our country. Mr. Pitts, you are involved with an issue that is very interesting to this committee, and that is your representation of several professional sports labor organizations addressing the issue of name, image, and likeness and compensation for that. Can you tell us about how you got involved in that?
Certainly, and thank you for the question, Senator. My colleagues and I represented 5 different unions of professional athletes in a number of cases that raised the question of whether video game makers in particular were entitled to exploit the likenesses of college athletes as a First Amendment matter to increase the sale of their games, or whether they had an obligation to pay the athletes for use of their name, images, and likenesses to increase the value of those video games. And we filed amicus briefs arguing that the proper balancing test in that case did show that the video game maker wasn't required to compensate those college athletes for the use of their name, images, and likenesses, and that was the position that both the Third Circuit and the Ninth Circuit adopted in their own decisions on the issue.
Judge Gallagher, I understand that you manage the pro se docket in Colorado.
I do, Senator.
What that means?
Yes, thank you for the question. So Colorado has over 35 penal institutions, both state and federal, and the pro se docket is our intake docket where we screen approximately 1,200 prisoner and other pro se litigant cases that come into the court every year. It's an efficient way of determining whether cases need to move forward and have judicial attention moving forward, or whether they are cases that are frivolous or for other reasons shouldn't move forward. As this committee knows, the flood of pro se cases, which make up approximately 1/3 of the District of Colorado's civil dockets, need a lot of time and attention, bring serious issues to the court, and I've been proud to manage that docket for the past 8 or so years.
Thank you. Mr. Subramanian, you've run the table on clerkships. I think you've been at every level of the federal courts, and you've observed a lot of judges all the way up to the Supreme Court with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. What have you learned in your exposure to all of these judges at all these different levels that will guide you if your nomination is approved?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. The one unifying quality, I think, of a great judge is to treat every case like it's the most important case. Not even at the Supreme Court, most of the cases are not headline grabbing. But what sets the great judges apart is to treat even the most mundane seeming cases like they're the most important, because they are the most important to the litigants in those cases, and to be open-minded, to work hard. These are the values that all 3 of the judges I worked for had in spades.
Good to know that. Ms. Hidalgo, I'm running out of time to ask questions, but I want to tell you that the bipartisan support we put together for the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act after 5 years of effort really is one of the major achievements of the last 2 years in this committee. I wish you the best in your work, and I know that filling this vacancy has been waiting for a while. I'm sure you'll do that job and do it well. Senator Grassley.
Thank you, Chair Durbin.
Lately, it's become an issue of whether spouses of justices or judges should be involved in policy or politics. And Mr. Pitts, you worked for Judge Reinhardt at one time he was asked to recuse himself because of his wife's employment. And he said this in his declining that request, quote, "My wife's views, public or private, as to any issue that may come before the court, constitutional or otherwise, are of no consequences." He also explained that when he joined the Ninth Circuit, ethics rules said that, quote, "Judges should ensure that their wives not participate in politics." Judge Reinhardt noted that the rule had changed. Now, you work at Ultra Berzon and worked with Judge Marcia Bershon's husband many years. So a pretty simple question. Do you agree that judges' spouses can be involved in politics or the law?
Thank you for the question, Senator Grassley. I think certainly that there is a scope for the spouses of judges to be involved in public affairs. I think, but judges certainly need to be very aware of the Code of Judicial Conduct that binds district court judges. And if I were so lucky as to be confirmed, if a case were to arise, I would carefully consult the Code of Judicial Conduct, any relevant opinions, and my chief judge to determine whether there would be any question as to my impartiality that could be called into question. And I would certainly make sure to recuse in any case where my impartiality could reasonably be called into question.
Last question to you, Mr. Pitts. Do you believe the meaning of a statute can change over time without being amended?
Thank you for the question, Senator Grassley. I think that the best evidence of a statute's meaning is its text, and that the Supreme Court has said that most recently in the Bostock opinion, for example, that we should look to the original meaning of the language as used at the time of its enactment to determine the meaning of the statute. So certainly if I were so fortunate as to be confirmed, I would follow the Supreme Court's guidance regarding the history or the time to which we should look for the meaning of language in interpreting any statute.
Judge Schapler, I'm interested in how you read the Constitution and statutes. First, do you believe in a living Constitution?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Grassley. I don't subscribe to any interpretive philosophy beyond what the Supreme Court directs me to apply in cases. So with regard to statutes, I would start always with the text of the statute itself, looking to the plain meaning of the words and the structure of the statute. I would look to binding Supreme Court and Ninth Circuit precedent, and that should resolve any ambiguities in a statute for me. In the event it didn't, I would use the interpretive tools that the Supreme Court has directed me to use, such as the canons of construction and persuasive and analogous precedents.
Do you believe that a meaning of a statute can change over time?
No, I do not, Senator. According to the Supreme Court, the statute is fixed by the intent of the legislators who passed it.
Do you believe that how should federal judges weigh policy considerations when interpreting a statute?
They should not weigh any policy considerations when interpreting a statute. A judge's job is merely to interpret and apply the law. It is left to policymakers and the legislature to determine policy.
Yeah. Judge Subramanian, as a practicing attorney, how often have you worked has your work involved criminal matters?
Thank you, Ranking Member Grassley. During my 3 clerkships at every level of the federal judiciary, I frequently worked on criminal matters. Over the past 15 years, as I've worked as a complex civil litigator, my practice has focused on civil litigation.
Have you had any criminal cases that you personally handled?
At Sussman Godfrey, during the last 15 years, my practice has focused exclusively on civil litigation.
Okay. Judge, well, my time's out. I'll submit the rest for answering questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Feinstein, you have any questions?
Yes. I have a question, Ms. Hidalgo. Hidalgo, if I might. There you are. I want to start by thanking you for the support that your team at the White House Gender Policy Council provided to the successful reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. And I believe the law has made really important advances in protecting survivors of domestic violence. And the next director is going to face the task of successfully implementing the new provisions provided in the most recent reauthorization of VAWA. What do you believe will be the biggest challenges in implementing the new law? And how will you work to address those challenges to ensure that the law is implemented both quickly and effectively?
Thank you, Senator Feinstein, for that question, and also much gratitude to the Senate Judiciary Committee for the leadership of all the members of this committee in securing this bipartisan reauthorization of VAWA that not only renewed it, but strengthened it. And thank you, Senator, for that question, because if I'm confirmed, it will be an honor to have an opportunity to work with the excellent staff at the Office on Violence Against Women and with Department of Justice, other components as well, to advance the implementation of VAWA and to ensure that we are providing the level of quality services and support for all survivors to make sure that they can access safety and to be able to access justice and healing. And I think one of the challenges is really making sure that we're meeting the unique needs of survivors. There is no one-size-fits-all approach, and that's the excellent aspect of VAWA, that it recognizes how important it is to support a full range of programs in all 56 states and territories and tribal communities, and making sure that we're reaching the needs also of those from underserved communities, and continuing to also strengthen the coordinated community response, which is such a critical hallmark, and call in as many different community partners into strengthening that approach.
Got a big job ahead of you, I think.
Thank you,
Mr. Pitts, if you're confirmed, you're going to fill a seat that's been designated as a judicial emergency. According to federal statistics, the current number of weighted filings per judgeship in the Northern District of California is 816. That's one of the highest in the country. So this means that you're going to be facing very heavy caseloads your first day on the job. So it's important that you hit the job running and quickly pick up and manage a wide range of caseloads. How would you handle that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. If I'm so fortunate as
Could
to
you raise the mic a little?
Sorry, I apologize. Thank you for the question, Senator. If I'm so fortunate as to be confirmed, I will use the same approach that I've had to use throughout my litigation practice over the more than a decade that I've been a litigator and litigating more than 160 complex civil cases. I've frequently had to encounter new areas of the law, new forums, and quickly come up to speed on those areas and master the area of the law. So I would look to the rules, the relevant rules, the statutes, any constitutional provisions, any precedents, and I would also look to whatever resources are available to me, whether the Federal Judicial Center has resources available on the topic. And in particular, I would look to the other members of the Northern District of California. It is a particularly collegial and experienced and wonderful court right now, and I would look to them for assistance and guidance, from even before I accept my first case on the court.
Well, the number of weighted filings per judgeship in the Northern District of California is 816, and it's one of the highest in the country. So it's a big job to consider, and I hope you would really think of how you would handle that precisely.
And I have done so, Senator, thank you. And I look forward to taking on that challenge.
Okay. Where's Mr. Schapler? Right there. Okay. You've served as a federal magistrate judge in the Southern District of California since 2016. You've also served as a volunteer judge pro tem for the Small Claims Court in San Diego Superior Court. And so you have experience presiding over a wide variety of both civil and criminal matters. What lessons have you learned from your past service as this kind of judge? And how would that experience shape your approach for judicial service if you're confirmed to the federal bench?
Thank you, Senator. And to be clear, my service as a judge pro tem was the 5 years prior to becoming a U.S. magistrate judge. Yes, for the last 11 years, I've handled a variety of cases. I would echo comments that my co-nominee, Mr. Subramanian, made that it's important to treat every case as though that is the most important case in the world, because that's the way that the litigants themselves will treat it. And if I were fortunate enough to be confirmed to continue serving my country in a new capacity as a U.S. district judge, I would intend on continuing that practice.
Well, that doesn't tell me how you would handle them. How would you handle the number?
As far as the numbers of cases in the Southern District of California, I would treat it the way I have throughout my career. As a magistrate judge, we're dealing with that same caseload, but different parts of the cases. And my staff and I work through every case in an organized fashion to make sure we're handling the caseload. And I've done that throughout my career, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of you. Mr. Subramanian, looking at your resume here, have you ever made a B?
I believe I have.
Oh my gosh. How many?
I wouldn't know the numbers right here.
You made partner at Sussman and Godfrey in 4 years. Is that right?
I think that's correct. 2011.
How many hours did you bill last year? About 1,000? Sound about right?
I'm sure I worked more than 1,000, and I'm sure.
How many hours did you bill last year? I'm just curious.
I'm not sure about the exact billables, but I am sure that I worked more than 1,000 hours because my wife we've had conversations about that.
I bet. In your career at Sussman and Godfrey, it's a great law firm. How much have you ever sat down and calculated the total amount of money you've collected for all your clients?
I've never done that math.
Okay. I'm curious, you clerked for Judge Ginsburg? Is that right?
Justice Ginsburg, yes.
Justice Ginsburg, yeah. I call all judges judges, even if they're justices. I'm curious what you think about the leak in the Dobbs decision at the court.
I think that the violation of ethical rules that apply to all court members, which includes absolute confidentiality, is a very serious matter. And I know that the Supreme Court has investigated that particular matter. And certainly one of the things that I've thought about in how I structure my own chambers is to make sure that all members of the court family, including the law clerks, understand the requirements of confidentiality. These are high value matters to all the litigants, and confidentiality is vital.
Yeah. Well, you've got a very impressive resume. Mr. Pitts, you clerked for Judge Reinhardt. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. I was looking at a piece published in the Yale Law Journal. You didn't write it, but this is the way the author described Judge Reinhardt. She said, I'm going to quote a few lines, if that's okay. The judge, Judge Reinhardt, is open about his disdain for the path the Supreme Court has charted during the last few decades. He scathingly repeats the claim that judges are supposed to do law, not justice, shaking his head as if the statement alone were enough to establish its wrong-headedness. He views his prodigious reversal rate, he was reversed a lot by the Supreme Court. He views his prodigious reversal rate with the Supreme Court as a mark of distinction. Do you agree with that judicial approach?
Thank you for the question, Senator. If I'm so fortunate as to be confirmed, my only approach as a judge would be to apply the law impartially, faithfully, fairly, and objectively to the specific facts of each case before me. That would be the only approach I would take to the role.
So you disagree with Judge Reinhardt's approach?
As you noted, this was a secondary account. I don't know if that is an accurate account of his approach to the law, but I would
I think it pretty much is. We all know that.
My goal as a judge would be to apply the law impartially, faithfully, and objectively, and to ensure that every litigant who comes before me feels that they've been treated fairly and with dignity and respect.
Were any of the sexual harassment allegations that were made against Judge Reinhardt, any of those allegedly happen when you were a clerk?
No, they did not.
Okay. Have you ever made a B?
I believe I have.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. The witnesses got off easy with Senator Kennedy not being asked about Daubert hearings or motions in limine. But I suspect this panel would know. First of all, let me welcome Ms. Hidalgo. Thank you so much for your willingness to serve in this very, very, very important position at the Department of Justice. As the Attorney General of Rhode Island, I had the privilege of overseeing our domestic violence unit, which was one of the leading units in the country, and our domestic violence community groups are among the most accomplished in the country. So it's very important work that you're doing, and I wish you every success in it. Thank you so much for being here. For the candidates for the bench, I'd like to ask you all a question about juries. This is a question that I ask pretty often. Obviously, a jury is a fact-finding appendage of the court, but according to extremely knowledgeable people, all the way from Blackstone to commentators in our present day, it's actually a good deal more. It is a part of the American system of governance. It is one of the ways in which regular citizens on occasion have the opportunity to actually participate in government decision-making. And it is an area of government that is protected really more than any other against special interest influence. Juries are assembled from the public. They don't do two cases, they just do the one, so there's no point going back to them afterwards to try to curry favor or influence. If you try to mess with them while they're jurors, that's actually a crime. So we do our very best to come through on Judge Blackstone's description of the jury as the institution that is there to help give regular folks a chance against what he called the more powerful and wealthy citizens, which, since the Supreme Court has decided that corporations are now people, also includes powerful and wealthy corporate interests. Notwithstanding that, there's been a fairly pronounced effort that I have chronicled at the court to try to diminish and deprecate the civil jury, largely for that reason, if you subscribe to my theory that this is a Supreme Court that is highly beholden to those big corporate interests. But you will have much more direct experience of civil juries. You will have to see to their care and feeding, both figuratively and literally. And you will have to decide when cases belong in front of a jury and to encourage and support the juries when they are before you. It's not always everybody's favorite thing to get that jury notice, but my experience was that both as to grand jurors and to trial jurors, at the end, almost all thought that it had been a really terrific experience in their lives. So I'd just like each of you to make a brief comment on how and to what extent you will try to protect and expand the role of the jury in your courtroom. Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator. Within the last month, I've had the opportunity to thank and release the grand jury that appears before me, to convene the new one, and to take the jury return finding a defendant guilty in an extremely serious sex assault matter before the federal court. And I'm reminded each time of the important backstop that the jury provides between the people and the government, the important democratic role that those jurors serve, and how much they truly do appreciate it, even though it is a difficult sacrifice in their lives, particularly the extent of grand jury service. And I'll do everything in my power to ensure that particularly those cases that I have some control over, pending civil and criminal matters, get to a jury in an efficient manner if that's where the parties wish to proceed.
Mr. Pitts?
Thank you for the question. I agree that juries are a fundamental aspect of American governance, the American legal system, and liberty as our Constitution protects it. And if I'm so fortunate as to be confirmed, I will faithfully apply the precedents and rules governing the jury system.
Mr. Schapler?
John Adams said that representative government and trial by jury are the heart and lungs of liberty. And as you know, Senator, in the Declaration of Independence, that was the deprivation of the right to trial by jury was one of the causes of the American Revolution. To this day, it remains one of the few mandatory duties of U.S. citizenship, jury service. And so if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I would proudly and faithfully uphold the right to trial by jury that's enshrined in Article 3 and the 6th and 7th Amendments.
Mr. Subramanian, and briefly, since my time has expired and I'm operating now at the chair's indulgence.
Juries are vital both in the criminal and civil context, and Steve Sussman was the founder of the Civil Jury Project, and he well understood how important juries were, especially in civil cases.
Thank you for saying that name.
Thank you very much. Senator Blackburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to each of you. I know this is an exciting time for you and your families, and Ms. Hidalgo, I hope that your daughter gets back to exams. And we may need to give her a Senate excuse note, right? And be sure that she's not dinged. All those extra points are good. Let's see, Mr. Pitts, let me come to you if I may, please. I want to go back and talk about Judge Reinhardt's work. You clerked for him, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you were there from 2008 to 2009.
That's correct.
All right. And as I was looking back through your background and Judge Reinhardt's work, I remembered the allegations of him having his pretty shelf. His shelf of pretty clerks, where he kept photos of only female clerks. And he would say that that shelf was special to him. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with such a shelf.
You never heard any conversation about that?
I did not, no.
You never heard that, okay. So what do you think about that?
That allegation was a surprise to me. I knew that I remember from the times I'd visited chambers that the judge had a picture of my husband and I behind his desk on the shelf there.
Okay. After Judge Reinhardt died, you issued a statement for the San Francisco Bar Association that called Judge Reinhardt an inspiration and stated that he showed a commitment to justice, fairness, and equality. But then you turned around 2 years later and signed a statement supporting a former law clerk and she was a clerk to Judge Reinhardt, and she claimed the judge sexually harassed her during her clerkship. So I'm having a tough time squaring your two statements. So tell me, which is it? Was he an inspiration, or is he somebody that you would call a sexual predator?
As set forth in the second statement, that noted that many signatories to that statement had not witnessed anything that they would consider abuse of any kind or sexual harassment while they were clerks, and I was one of those clerks. I had never witnessed such conduct from the judge. I did believe that it was important to express support for anyone who comes forth with allegations of sexual harassment.
So you have no problem with the two statements that look as if they're contradicting statements?
I thought that they were both consistent statements with my experience from my law clerkship.
Okay. All right, Mr. Subramanian, am I saying that properly?
Subramanian.
Subramanian, I'm
got it.
close. Okay. All right, an organization that you belong to, Fund for Modern Courts. They published a report recommending that the state of New York enact policy changes to protect individuals from ICE interference and overreach by ICE in New York courthouses. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not familiar with that particular.
You're not familiar with the purpose of the organization?
No, I am familiar with the purpose of the organization.
Okay, and their policy recommendation. Are you familiar with this? This was published before you joined the organization. So you joined an organization that was explicitly advocating to help illegal immigrants evade and circumvent federal immigration authorities. Are you aware of that?
I am not aware of that particular.
You never had any knowledge of this?
Well, as you said, that particular statement had been made.
So
when I
you
was
joined the
not-
organization but didn't read the statement or what they were for?
Well, to be clear, the Fund for Modern Courts mission is to increase transparency in the state courts, increase diversity in the state courts, and to achieve changes in the state court system to make
And
it
one of those
more available.
changes that they were advocating for was to help illegal immigrants evade. What does that word mean to you?
Well, as I said, I'm not familiar with the
Okay.
statement that you're referring to.
They were going to help them evade ICE and evade the overreach of ICE. So do you endorse this policy? Do you think that it is appropriate for someone who is requesting to sit as a federal judge to support a policy and an organization that says we're going to help you circumvent the law?
Thank you, Senator. That statement, I'm not even sure what the policy is. As you noted, it was not a policy that was enacted during the time that I was affiliated with the organization, and it's not something
This
that's been-
organization has activist immigration goals, and you chose to join the organization. Did you join it for that reason?
No, as I said, the primary mission of the fund.
Do you believe that the states and the state courts should interfere with federal immigration law, yes or no?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I think that's a question for policymakers.
No,
You
sir,
can-
it is a question for you.
As
It is a direct question for you, sir. Are you advocating that people should be evading federal law because you're requesting to sit on a federal bench?
Absolutely. And as a judge, I would faithfully apply federal law applicable in any case that I handle, even-handedly, to protect and uphold the law and push forward the principle of equal justice under the law.
I'll have more for you on that. Mr. Chairman, I just think it is such an imperative that people that are wanting to sit on the federal court respect the rule of law and the application of the rule of law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to all of the nominees, your families, and your friends. To ensure the fitness of all the nominees before me, I ask the following two initial questions of every nominee who comes before any of the 5 committees on which I sit. So I'll start with Mr. Gallagher, and we'll just go down the line. 2 questions. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
I've read all of your backgrounds, very, very impressive. I would like to focus most of my 5 minutes on asking Ms. Hidalgo some questions. This is a position that has been led by an acting director for many years. I don't know why that was the case. You are coming before us as the first Senate-confirmed person for what I consider to be a very important position, because there is absolutely no question in my mind that there is gender-based violence in our country, and we need to spend a lot more resources and time focusing on eliminating, preventing, and prosecuting those who engage in such conduct. So on Thursday, I just wanted to mention, on September 29, 2022, FBI Director Wray appeared before this committee for an oversight hearing. And during that hearing, I shared with them my concerns about sex trafficking in the Native Hawaiian community. And I think you are aware that Native peoples, Native women and children, suffer at much higher rates of both sexual violence and trafficking. So this would be Native Hawaiian, as well as Alaska Natives and American Indian women and children. But Hawaiian women and girls represent 67% to 77% of sex trafficking victims identified in recent studies, and further, Native Hawaiians also represent 37% of reported child sex trafficking cases. Director Wray acknowledged during his testimony that gangs and drug trafficking organizations active in Hawaii exploit vulnerable victims, especially Native Hawaiians. So I'd like to ask you, what steps can the Office of Violence, should you be confirmed, Office of Violence Against Women take to improve support for survivors of gender-based violence among especially vulnerable communities such as Native Hawaiian communities?
Thank you, Senator Hirono, for that question. I share your commitment and concern to ensuring that the resources through the Violence Against Women Act and the ways in which these grant programs are implemented really should seek to serve all individuals, including with a specific focus on recognizing some communities that are historically marginalized or underserved, and doing more to make sure that the resources can really strengthen community-based organizations in those communities reaching hard-to-serve populations. I think that's an important hallmark of the Violence Against Women Act with the coordinated community response. And at the White House, I had the opportunity recently to relaunch the Trilateral Working Group on Violence Against Indigenous Women and Girls in collaboration with the countries of Canada and Mexico and Indigenous women leaders, and really lifting up all the ways, both for Native Americans, but as you mentioned, also the importance with Alaska Native communities, Native Hawaiians, how we can continue to strengthen access to justice, comprehensive services, and prevention in these communities. And I look forward with OVW to advancing those goals.
Knowing that these communities that I talked about have much higher rates of these kinds of incidents, and the Office of Violence Against Women's budget is $513 million when I checked. So is most of that money going for grants to entities that work with these communities?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. So the VAWA funding, which is so critical, is sort of part of it goes out to the 56 states and territories and tribal communities through formula grants to make sure that all different states and territories and communities have opportunities to implement promising practices and strengthen the coordinated community response. But then there are also discretionary grant programs administered through the Office on Violence Against Women. And there's also specific programs seeking, for example, the culturally specific services programs or underserved community programs to really build capacity, support for innovation and promising practices.
Yeah. I'd like to, I raise these issues because I think that there needs to be a lot more focus on those communities that are particularly vulnerable, and those are the communities I mentioned. And when we talk about violence, gender-based violence across our country, 513 million does not go very far. I hope that you will be coming forward, if not you, your Department of Justice, to ask for a lot more funding, and I hope that this committee can support increased funding as well as other resources for your office.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I look forward to opportunities to work with you and the committee and Congress to advance those goals.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to have all of you here. Arun, it's good to see you. It's been a while since we've seen each other. I doubt very highly that last time we saw each other when we were finishing our clerkships at the Supreme Court that we would have predicted next time we'd see each other we would be here doing this. In any event, welcome. Mr. Pitts, I'd like to start with you. Tell me briefly how you describe your judicial philosophy.
I have not yet served as a judge, but if I'm so fortunate as to be confirmed, my plan is to apply the law objectively, impartially, and faithfully to the facts of each case before me, and to focus on the facts of each case and understand that that case is the most important case in the world to the litigants in that case, and that they deserve dignity and respect in their treatment in my courtroom.
When construing the text of a statute, do the words matter?
Absolutely.
Is the task of the jurist to ascertain what Congress subjectively intended or what Congress said?
I believe that the Supreme Court has instructed that the best evidence of what Congress intended is the text of the statute, and so the starting point for any statutory interpretation question should be the text of the statute.
Right. Especially since it's very difficult for anyone, whether it's a panel of 9 Supreme Court justices or an individual jurist or anyone else, to ascertain the subjective mindset of 435 representatives, 100 senators, and the president who signed something into law, making it something of an elusive mission. You were named as counsel of record to one of the amici submitting briefs in the Service Employees International Union. You're representing the Service Employees International Union in United States Department of Health and Human Services versus the state of Florida. This is one of the companion cases to NFIB versus Sebelius. The thrust of the amicus brief, which I've been looking at, was that the words that Congress used in the statute might not be dispositive in there. That is, whether or not Congress chose to define the exaction at issue in that case as a penalty or as a tax was of no importance. In fact, he wrote, and I quote, "Congress's use of the word penalty rather than tax has no constitutional significance." Tell me what you meant by that.
That brief, which was filed in the cases involving the constitutionality of the individual mandate, noted that the role that a court plays in determining the constitutionality of a statute may be somewhat different from the role that a court would play when it's construing the statute for purposes of determining whether it applies or doesn't apply to particular conduct, and that it applied precedents regarding the role of courts in reviewing a statute going back really to the start of our federal judiciary, recognizing that the court's obligation is to uphold a statute if possible, and that under that structure, it was appropriate to view the individual mandate as a tax, notwithstanding the language. That was the argument that was made and accepted by Chief Justice Roberts.
But you do acknowledge in the brief, and I assume you'd acknowledge today, that there is a difference. There's a line of jurisprudence that differentiates between something that is a tax and something as a penalty, right?
That is true. That is a distinction that exists in the law.
So it does matter, and so it's hard for me to see that the use of the word penalty rather than tax is of no constitutional significance.
I think it depends on the context in which you're operating, and in that context, we made the argument that was ultimately successful in the United States Supreme Court, that it was not dispositive, and that that was not a basis for overturning a statute that Congress had duly enacted.
But in the same brief, you seem to suggest that judges and justices shouldn't look, or should look rather, to Congress's purpose It's subjective intent and purpose in enacting a particular piece of legislation, and not to the exact words used in that legislation. In the brief, you state that proponents of a more textualist approach than this, a more textualist approach to interpreting the statute, quote, ignore the substance and operation of the minimum coverage provision and ask the court to act as Congress's copy editor and return the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act to Congress for wordsmithing. So again, quoting from your brief, you stated this kind of magic words jurisprudence is not the law and is deeply disrespectful of the legislative prerogatives. But I mean, I struggle a little bit with that formulation. I mean, isn't it the role of the judiciary to interpret the statute based on what the words say? And this gets to this point about ascertaining the subjective intent of 435 representatives, 100 senators, and the president who signed the bill into law. Is that possible, and can that really serve as a valid, rational foundation for construing a statute?
First, that brief was filed approximately a decade ago, so I don't recall the specific argument that you're referencing there. But that was a brief that we filed on behalf of our clients, and we made the argument well-grounded, we thought, in the Supreme Court's jurisprudence regarding how to treat this kind of question, that in that particular context, it was appropriate to look beyond the words of the statute, where the question was, will the statute be allowed to be upheld or be struck down on that basis? And that was the argument which we thought was well-founded in the Supreme Court's decisions.
Thank you. See if my time's expired.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Subramanian, I want to enter into the record, with the chairman's permission, a letter that was submitted to our committee from a number of your former co-clerks, individuals who worked with you, actually co-clerks who worked for Justices Scalia, Thomas, Souter, as well as Ginsburg and Kennedy, attesting to their belief that you, I'm quoting, possess the intellect, temperament, experience, and judgment to serve with distinction as a United States District Judge, end quote, and indicating your strong commitment to the rule of law and to enforcing the law, which I think goes to some of the questions that you've been asked previously. It certainly is very powerful evidence of that commitment, if there's no objection.
Without objection.
Thank you. Ms. Hidalgo, thank you for your extraordinary work on behalf of survivors and victims, your work on VAWA, its reauthorization, your work on providing funding, and throughout your career. When I was Attorney General of my state, I formed an organization called Men Against Domestic Violence, Men Make a Difference. And I think it is on all of us, men and women alike. It's not a woman's problem or issue. Domestic violence is all of our responsibility, and the funding for organizations that work on this issue is vital. $3.4 million came to Connecticut, funding organizations like the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence. With that help, we have 24-hour staffing in all of our domestic violence shelters, and we have stronger systems to apply and implement and enforce civil restraining orders and protective orders against abusers. And yet, we still have this scourge of domestic violence. Most recently, and most publicly, the death of a young woman, Julie Minogue, in Milford, Connecticut. I went to the vigil for her just last Sunday, killed by an intimate partner who was under a protective order at various points. She literally pleaded for help to the police department. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the warrant was not reissued, and her death happened. I guess my question to you is, how do we respond to the need for more enforcement of orders and protections when there is that moment of crisis and rage and threat and danger to someone like Julie Minogue?
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, for your commitment to these issues and for your question. And my heart goes out to her family and friends and community. And I think you're exactly right, Senator, as you noted. While we have made a lot of progress through VAWA, there's still a lot further to go. And I think one of the key aspects of the work through the Office on Violence Against Women and implementing VAWA is to continue to strengthen what's known as a coordinated community response of law enforcement, but also with victim service providers, community organizations, courts, prosecutors, healthcare providers, and others who can really help create different pathways to safety for those who may be too afraid to come forward. So I think we have to continue to strengthen those efforts, strengthen prevention, and strengthen training. Training and support for law enforcement on promising practices, on trauma-informed approaches that are victim-centered, and just to continue nationally as well to share the innovation and the ways in which we can make sure that law enforcement departments develop specialized units as well with the expertise to assess lethality and to make sure that individuals can be connected to critical services.
There's an ongoing investigation of the Minogue case, and we can't draw any final conclusions until that investigation is complete, but I would like your commitment that you will review it and perhaps indicate to us how it's an example of where we need to strengthen the system, what lessons we can learn from it, and how Connecticut can improve its system for better protecting survivors and victims of domestic violence.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. As you note, issues of fatality reviews are so critical to continue to bring out the lessons learned. And if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed at the Office on Violence Against Women, we look forward to ways to strengthen the ability of every jurisdiction to conduct fatality reviews and to do a lot more upfront with lethality assessments and with services and prevention to try to prevent these kinds of horrific cases. So if I'm fortunate to be confirmed, I look forward to engaging with you and other members of the Senate Judiciary Committee to advance those goals.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all of our nominees. Ms. Hidalgo, you worked in various roles for 10 years at Esperanza United, which is based in St. Paul, Minnesota. And when I was county attorney, I worked with them all the time. And just recently, when we were celebrating the passage of finally closing the boyfriend loophole in the Safer Communities Act. As you are well aware, the organization provides emergency shelter and a 24/7 bilingual crisis line to help domestic violence survivors in the Twin Cities. And you led the organization's national policy work. Can you talk about the impact that groups like Esperanza United have on the lives of victims and how you plan on engaging with these organizations in your new role if you were to be confirmed? I'd call this a softball question, but go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Thanks for all your leadership through the years, both with VAWA and with all the great work in Minnesota. And it was an honor to be able to work at Casa de Esperanza, now known as Esperanza United, because also it's a unique program that runs, as you noted, a domestic violence shelter and community-based programs, while also doing national work to improve policy, training, advocacy, research. So it really, to me, helped demonstrate how critical it is that any policy work needs to be informed by the lived realities on the ground of what it means to help survivors and to meet the unique needs of individual survivors. And also, through the work of Esperanza United, it's been an opportunity to help lift up why the coordinated community response needs to call in more community-based organizations, including from historically marginalized or underserved communities, make sure they're at the table in ensuring that all services and access to law enforcement, the courts, prosecutors, is a pathway available for all survivors, as well as to do a lot more on prevention, which is something that Esperanza United does, and others across the country funded through OVW.
Thank you. Mr. Pitts, you were actually born in Moorhead, Minnesota, although you've somehow decided to live in California. Don't quite get the decision. I don't think it will, influence my vote. But as you know, we call the area in Minnesota Moorhead-Fargo, not Fargo-Moorhead. As a private practitioner, you were focused primarily on advising public interest clients, unions, workers, teachers. If confirmed as a trial court judge, you'll be charged with maintaining a fair and impartial courtroom. Can you talk about how you'll make that transition from an advocate to a judge and why you want the job?
Certainly. Thank you. Certainly. Thank you, Senator. And Minnesota remains close to my heart, particularly our lake cabin in western Minnesota, where I still go every year.
Okay, that gives you some points. Thank you.
I absolutely understand the distinction between my role as an advocate for workers, nonprofit entities, municipal entities, and other governments, and the role that I'm hopeful that this committee will support me in taking on as a judge. My role as a judge will be to apply the law impartially, faithfully, objectively to all of the litigants before me, and to make sure that those litigants feel that no matter how the case comes out, that they've been treated fairly, and that the law has been applied fairly, and that they've been treated with dignity. And I understand that the importance of that, in part because as an advocate, I've relied upon judges applying the law impartially, faithfully, and objectively in my own cases. And that has been the standard that I have looked for. I have not wanted to win a case by virtue of something unfair in the process. Almost certainly I would then lose it on appeal if that had happened in the first case. My goal in all instances was to have a judge who would apply the law fairly, objectively, and impartially, and I sought to make arguments before that an impartial judge would accept, and I've been fortunate to have a fair degree of success in doing so.
Judge Schapler, I'm a big believer in veterans treatment courts and the like. When I started in Hennepin County, we had a drug court that was pretty well respected. We had a domestic violence court. And then we focused on mental health court with property crimes, and then later a veterans court, which I was a big fan of and am nationally. I have continued to lead bills to try to put more funding into drug courts. Can you talk about your experience with diversion programs and their impact in reducing recidivism?
Absolutely, Senator. It has been one of the great honors of my career as a magistrate judge to preside and be the founding judge of our Veterans Diversion Court. We already had a Veterans Treatment Court, and both of these courts try to give veterans who have served our country a second chance. It's aimed really at first offenders and people who have suffered from combat trauma, PTSD, things of that nature. It's a very intensive program that lasts about 18 months and involves intensive monitoring, and we're very proud of the fact that we have an extremely low recidivism rate, and we're able to have these veterans come out of the program as upstanding citizens serving their country once again.
To say congratulations to you, Judge Gallagher and Mr. Subramanian. I have 10 questions for you. No, I'm kidding. I just saw your kids behind you and thought maybe that would, make them want to leave the room. But I did want to thank you, my closing comment, and that this May you contributed to a report that discussed how allowing cameras in New York State courtrooms could increase transparency and further public understanding in the judicial process. I know Senator Durbin, it's the Cameras in the Courtroom Act. Senator Grassley and I have worked on this together as well. The Sunshine in the Court Act, just coming out of the George Floyd murder trial in Minnesota, the Derek Chauvin trial, where people were able to see firsthand the witnesses and see the police officers who testified against Derek Chauvin. I think that was a really important moment for the country. The judge in that case happened to used to work for me, so he made that decision to allow the cameras in the courtroom. But I think in that case, it was really important to have that transparency, including the community members who clearly bear such a burden for so long. So you could just say a few words, but I just wanted to thank you for focusing on that issue, and I very much believe we should do that at the Supreme Court. Having the privilege of watching the North Carolina independent legislator, I won't talk about that theory right now. Just last week, I got to be there, and it was an incredible experience, and I just think more people should be able to see their courts in action. But if you want to answer.
Thank you, Senator. And I agree with you that the public's right to know and transparency is vitally important. And we're making steps. I know that the Supreme Court during the pandemic started live streaming their oral arguments so that everyone can follow along in these cases in real time.
Oral, though.
Oral.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And so, and obviously, there is a public function to the adjudication of cases, and the public is always supposed to have access. And I agree with you; it's vitally important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. I want to thank all of the nominees and their patience with the questions. I thank my colleagues who participated. The majority of the committee participated in this hearing. I want to thank all the friends and family who made sacrifices to be here in support of the nominees today. There may be one last piece of work that you should be mindful of. Questions for the record are possible by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, December 20th, and the record will likewise remain open until that time to submit letters and similar materials. If nothing further to come before the Senate Judiciary Committee, it stands adjourned.